What's the dumbest thing someone has ever tried to convince you was the truth? It's hard to choose just one, so I'll share some of my favorites all from one person. Oh, I'll never let my kids watch SpongeBob. I saw a study on Facebook about how each episode permanently reduces the viewer's IQ by 30 points. Gluten causes brain damage and isn't in natural foods. It was added into American foods after we as a way to control us. Oh, I can't eat non-organic meats. They contain gluten because the animal ate wheat or corn and that changes their DNA. Children can't be genetically screened. They don't have any DNA until adulthood. Those idiot doctors don't know what they're talking about. I've done my research and I'm a mother. It's not that hard to Google it. She diagnosed her child with a rare genetic disease based on a mommy group and Google. Back when he was 8. My oldest son went through a phase where he would steal food from the fridge and lie about it. The lying got so bad that I set up a camera to monitor the fridge. One night, the camera caught him sneaking downstairs, grabbing a spoon, opening the freezer, and taking out a pint of ice cream. But of course his back was to the camera, so I couldn't actually see what he was doing with it. He stood there for a while moving the arm with the spoon, obviously eating the ice cream. He then put back the pint and went back to bed. The next morning I checked the freezer and found an empty pint of ice cream. I confronted him about it and showed him the footage from the camera. Straight-faced, he told me I took it out of the fridge but I didn't eat it. I just held it for a while. There are lies, and then there are just insults to your intelligence. You hear the sound of thunder before you see the lightning. They were convinced this was true. I told them to Google it. That the dust on the side of roads after winters is mostly dog poo. I was just speechlessly thinking about the huge army of stray dogs invading all the streets and roads every winter night to poo and disappearing to the woods at summer. There was a guy at a bar who tried to convince me he was a NASA astronaut, that he would be leaving for the moon tomorrow and was unsure if he would ever return, and, on his last night on Earth, he could think of nothing he wanted more than to spend a night with me. Someone tried to convince me that dragons were real. I have 2 dragon tattoos and this lady tried to point out the anatomical inconsistencies of my dragons. I tried telling her that dragons are fake animals and have never existed, to which she replied that there are historical records proving otherwise. I caved and asked her to cite her evidence. She asked if I ever watched Game of Thrones and the Desolation of Smaug, as if she's suggesting that the storyline and fantastical creatures were evidence enough that these beasts existed. I couldn't help it. I should have just walked away, but I kept egging her on, like saying things like, oh yeah, I can see Daenerys totally doing that, or yeah, why wouldn't Smaug want to keep all those coins? It went on for an hour. Oh my gosh, you spray your cat with water? Me? I don't want her on the counter, just a light spray. Her? Why? Do you know that water actually hurts them, right? She then went on to explain that pure H2O actually really agitates the skin and it is very painful for the cat. I started chuckling because I thought she was trying to be funny, but she kept a straight face. 2 come to mind. Someone tried to convince me that he had this revolutionary idea. Essentially, he wanted to use a car battery to spin a DC motor that is coupled to an alternator in the trunk. I explained why that was not a very efficient idea, and that it would be better to just eliminate the alternator altogether and run straight from the battery, short periods of time, like 1,320 feet at a time. He couldn't understand why it wouldn't work. On an 8-figure project, I had a boss who had apparently seen too many sci-fi movies. He had this bizarre idea that the specific technology worked like it did in the movies, and somehow sold that idea to one of our largest customers. I tried warning said customer, but my boss continually lied and eventually won the customer over. Of course, The project was a complete and total disaster because of it. I even told the CEO of the company, well, when you have idiots running around sharing plots from sci-fi movies as if it's commonplace reality, these sorts of things are bound to happen. The company lost their ass on it, and the customer suffered major losses as well. My name is on a subpoena list somewhere, but my employer purposefully kept me out of it because they knew I would side with the customer on the basis of simple morality. That my 1 Gbps network switch is the bottleneck of my home network system, which runs a 200 Mbps line. My ISP has some dumb people at times, but this took the cake. The real bottleneck turned out to be a dual-sided affair. They never gave me the fiber box required for connections above 100 Mbps, and my trusty 12-year-old D-Link router was capped at 120 Mbps. That unicorns were not only real, but that they lived in Northern Europe. This 20-year-old girl had a full-on argument in the middle of a part about this. The look of sadness on her face as she slowly realized that they weren't real was just ... so beautiful lol. That John Wilkes Booth became president after shooting Lincoln. I'm pretty sure they actually thought this was true though, since they were in 3rd grade and never really studied how democracy works. I used to know a guy who was a solipsist. Solipsism is a belief that only one's own mind can exist and everything outside of that is not real. That includes other people. He used to try to convince others that they were just props in his experience and not actual beings. One day I asked him, if I don't exist, then why does my back hurt so much? He didn't have an answer. My friend's mom used to tell us she was a nurse and that when babies were born without eyelids they would use the excess skin from the babies that had just been circumcised to give them new ones. On Reddit, an American tried to convince me, a Canadian, how my company's healthcare plan worked. He wasn't even close to right. The audacity that he just somehow understood my healthcare provider plan better than me just floored me. If the vagina is looser, she has definitely had more sex. Bonus points if she has sex with different men, and monogamous women keeps it tight. Special recognition. GMO food can alter your DNA. That's why the virus corona has mutated even worse. Twitter PM to my GF the GMO scientist. Someone on this very internet once tried to argue with me that Obama was in office in 2008. This was about 2012, and they went back and forth with me about it for far too long before Googling that easily verifiable information. My mother argued with me to the point of screaming and tears over which city I live in. She kept insisting I was wrong about where I live as if I somehow didn't know. The city she is so adamant is several hours away. I think she was just upset because the other city has more prestige and she likes to boast to people that I live there, even if I don't. At some point she must have convinced herself of it. My middle school, the smart kid in class, the kind to show it off, told me if I held my breath while running the mile I could run as fast and far as I wanted because it uses no oxygen. I said no way because that made no sense and asked him to show me. He was reluctant and basically ran like 100 feet, then basically passes out now. Every damn conspiracy theory. Right now, I have a favorite fact that people keep bringing up about 9/11, so I think it must have come up in the last year or so on some conspiracy site. Fire only burns at a single, constant temperature, so something like jet fuel is incapable of changing the constant and raising the temperature of a fire. The idea that steel fails at a certain temperature is a myth, since candles also burn at that constant. And you can pass your finger through one all day long, or even pinch the wick to put it out, and not suffer severe burns. This one time my friend in 8th grade thought it would be funny to convince the class he had committed a murder. Everyone talked about it and it got around to the entire school, and someone very serious actually believed it and told the teachers, and they were ignorant like teachers usually aren't. He got reported to the police and he spent 2 weeks in juvie. I was working at a dorm and this guy came into a shared space to talk to me, someone that can get people in trouble for drinking underage, while pretending he didn't have a whiskey bottle behind his back. I think it might have been a panic moment when he saw me, or maybe he was trying to test how likely I was to write people up. I still don't know why he went out of his way to talk to me. Halfway through the conversation I asked how old he was. He said 19, which is legal drinking age in Ontario. I said, I don't know why you're trying to hide that bottle so poorly then, but you're legally old enough to drink that so long as it's in your room. And he said, oh, you're not going to write me up. And I said, why would I? You're not breaking any rules, but I have alcohol. That's not against the rules. Are you sure? Yes. Only then did he stop hiding the whiskey bottle from behind him as if I didn't notice, dropped the conversation entirely, and walked away. A friend's GF a few years back said her high school, class of '08, banned the book 50 Shades of Grey and there was uproar, but the ban stayed because it had originally been banned back in the 70s. Like, lady, the book had been out maybe 2 years at this point. I told her it started as a fan fiction to the Twilight Saga. She laughed. Still to this day she brings it up how I tried to pull a fast one over her. My social studies teacher sent me out the classroom for a couple of minutes and then brought me back in. The lesson continued for a bit and then he drew 2 lines on the blackboard, one long and one short. He then asked the class to put their hands up if they thought the lines were different lengths. I put my hand up but no one else did. Him and the rest of the class tried to convince me they were the same length. He was trying to demonstrate that people will feel compelled to agree with the group even if they know the group is wrong. I didn't agree. Sort of related, I told my 3-year-old daughter that badgers didn't exist. She was watching Peppa Pig on TV and I said, how's the black and white strippy one? Mrs. Badger, no such thing as a badger. Yes there is. No there isn't. You have seen a pig, a horse and a rabbit. But have you ever seen a badger? No I haven't, Dad. Then they don't exist. I forgot all about my little wind-up until 3 years later and I'm in big trouble because badgers' existence was proved at school while my daughter had been telling her mates that they were not real. Oh oops. I went to a religious high school, and of course, the history lessons are always taught from a weird, hyper-religious and American exceptionalist perspective, which, whatever. Okay, but one lesson I actually fought the teacher over was the idea that prohibition was the attempt of a righteous, godly nation to curb the evils of alcohol consumption. I was like, okay, 1, what kind of godly nation has to decide to try to end alcohol like 150 years after its conception? Shouldn't it have had that rule from the beginning? And 2, prohibition just created an enormous black market and basically caused the mob in NASCAR to explode. How are we saying those are good things? That Lil Huddy from TikTok is black to justify him saying the N-word. They made this whole story up about us from South Africa and his parents are black but he just has this condition called melac which is lacking melanin. And they went on and on for like 30 minutes. SMH. My brother's substitute teacher tried to convince everyone in science class that the earth was flat. He said it was round, and she yelled at him. This is when online school was a thing and I just casually came in and asked if the 6-foot social distancing rule pushed anyone over the edge yet. I got this from a tweet and I thought it was funny and there was the perfect moment to use it. That masks are scientifically proven not to work. A friend continues to have this view even though we're a year into the pandemic and they have been proven to work. I attempted to use various credible news sources and scientific journals to prove that this was not true, but she wasn't taking any of it. I've met a guy pretending to be me. We met through a friend of a friend and he introduced himself as my very unique nickname. Then he proceeded to try to impress the girl I was with by telling her about his job and connections, etc. The sector is quite small, and I would definitely have known him if he was telling the truth. I told him I was who he was pretending to be, and he just up and left, didn't say a word. A neurotic light-fingered ex-mate of mine lifted a friend's festival costume from their tent, but obviously felt bad the next day when he was telling us all it went missing. So bad that she owned up to having it right away, but it wasn't her that took it. No, obviously not, according to her, when she got a lift from her dad the night before from the festival, so she could sleep in her own bed. There was a hitchhiker who they picked up, heading in their direction. After they had dropped him off, she said she'd seen that he'd left the stolen festival costume behind on the backseat. How convenient at a 30,000 people size festival that they ran into him. No one believed she didn't nick it, and it took her a year to finally give the £90 costume back to him, which he had to pick up from her house. He lived miles away. Really weird and obviously skeptical. One of the girls I work with calls out all the time. She has wild claims all the time. The dumbest thing she has ever told us was that she had to go to the ER because she fell and was bleeding from her vagina. She then elaborated and said she had a hysterectomy a few years back and the doctors placed a uterine replacement tube to redirect things. What things I don't know. And that the tube busted in the fall. She dead-ass looked me in the face and told me that she knows I had cancer and had to have a complete hysterectomy. There are no such things as uterine replacement tubes to direct things after a hysterectomy. Older relative, greater than 60 m. When we were kids, there were elephants at Coney Island, and they'd let you pet them. We'd grab the end of the trunk and cover it up so they couldn't breathe. They'd stomp their feet, trying to get away. Insert evil laugh, and that's why an elephant's afraid of a mouse. Pause for effect, cause a mouse can crawl up an elephant's trunk and then he can't breathe. Me, 30F. Knowing his entire story is bullshit. Number, relative. It's true. Me, an elephant is not afraid of a mouse. Relative. Shocked Pikachu face. Yes, everybody knows that. It's cause it'll crawl up its nose and get stuck so he can't breathe. Me, you've seen an elephant shoot water out of its nose, right? Relative. Yeah, me, if it can shoot water out its nose, it can shoot a mouse out nose. Relative. Making an irritated pouty face, that's why you go to school, cause you're so smart. Some guy I dated for a while tried, with a straight face, to convince me that he was a psychic vampire. I have no idea what the hell that even means since I stopped listening after he said psychic vampire. Kept dating him for a bit after that though because he was okay in bed and usually paid for dates. He said a lot of other dumb shit too, but that one was probably the dumbest. I'm pretty sure he was a pathological liar. That people are able to sun gazes and stare at the sun in the way we stare at the stars at night. He tried to tell me that not only is it not harmful to our eyes, it helps them. He said that since the sun gives life and energy to all living things, our eyes can receive vitamins and energy from the sun too and actually help fix bad vision. Shit you not. My sibling believes that masks don't work. They stop oxygen from reaching your brain. And the current pandemic is fake. Viruses don't really exist. Social distancing and sanitizing is useless. Countless other ridiculous things and constantly sends me research from other idiots on YouTube. My sibling believes that masks don't work. They stop oxygen from reaching your brain. And the current pandemic is fake. Viruses don't really exist, social distancing and sanitizing is useless, countless other ridiculous things, and constantly sends me research from other idiots on YouTube.